Fuck Jake Paul.
Jake, throughout.
Mike Tyson has just terminated his highly anticipated fight with Jake Paul after Jake abruptly decided to cancel the bout immediately following their press conference. The tension began when Tyson, known for his direct approach, posed a few simple questions to Jake and casually suggested tweaking a couple of rules for their scheduled match on November 15th. Jake's reaction was unexpectedly intense. It was as if the mere suggestion of changing the rules completely rattled him. He erupted into a tirade, yelling at Tyson as though the proposed adjustments were a personal attack. This behavior is particularly surprising considering that just a few months ago, in March 2024, Jake Paul was practically begging Tyson for this fight. At that time, he eagerly accepted all of Tyson's conditions, signing the contract without hesitation. His recent outburst and decision to cancel the fight mark a dramatic shift in his attitude that Jake's actions suggest that the pressure of facing a boxing legend like Tyson, coupled with the potential rule changes, may have overwhelmed him. Tyson, however, remains unfazed by Jake's behavior, swiftly ending negotiations and terminating the fight. This decision closes the chapter on what could have been one of the year's most talked about boxing events. Just because Tyson didn't have any specific rules in mind back then doesn't mean he can't decide to shake things up now. So let's talk about that press conference at Fanatics Fest on August 18th, where things were supposed to be business as usual. A bit of hype, some classic trash talk, you know the drill. But no, Jake Paul had to turn it into a spectacle. Instead of just sticking to the script and throwing out some standard pre-fight banter, Jake decided to go full throttle on a mission to verbally destroy Mike Tyson. It wasn't enough for him to just poke fun. Oh no, he went for the jugular. Jake mocked Tyson's age, called him washed up, and as if that wasn't enough, he went after Tyson.
Sign the contract, big boy. Sign the contract.
No problem. Saturday, July 20th.
Tyson's health issues too, like some overconfident kid who thought he could tear down a legend with words alone. It was clear Jake wasn't just trying to sell the fight. He was trying to break Tyson mentally before they even stepped into the ring. But here's the thing. Jake clearly forgot who he was dealing with. Tyson, the man who once had the most feared fists in the world, didn't even flinch while Jake was going off like a firecracker. Tyson just stood there, calm as ever, taking it all in. Not a single word of retaliation, not even a twitch, just that stone-cold, unreadable expression that has sent chills down the spine of every opponent he's ever faced. It was like Tyson was letting Jake dig his own grave, storing every insult away for the moment when he could unleash his real response. Jake might have thought he was winning the mind games, but in reality, he was setting himself up for a fall. Tyson's silence wasn't a sign of defeat. It was the calm before a storm. Jake wasn't even close to being ready for. As Jake's rant continued, the atmosphere in the room began to shift dramatically. What had started as a routine press event, filled with the usual hype and pre-fight banter, quickly evolved into something far more intense and unsettling. You could feel the tension thickening in the air, and it wasn't just Jake's team noticing the change. The entire audience was picking up on it as well. Jake Paul, known for his unshakable bravado and over-the-top confidence, suddenly seemed to be losing his grip. The cracks in his facade became evident, especially when Mike Tyson, with the slightest hint of a smile, subtly suggested altering a few of the fight's rules. That it wasn't a grand, dramatic announcement, but it landed with more impact than anything Jake had thrown at Tyson during his tirade. The room fell silent, and all eyes were on Jake as he struggled to process the unexpected turn of events. You could almost see the gears turning in his mind as he tried to comprehend the implications of Tyson's words. For the first time that night, Jake's trademark swagger faltered. A brief, almost imperceptible moment of doubt flickered across his face, revealing a chink in the armor of the self-proclaimed problem child. This moment was a turning point, and it was clear to everyone present that Jake had just been handed a masterclass in psychological warfare. The energy in the room shifted dramatically, and suddenly, Jake was no longer the menacing figure he had portrayed himself to be. Instead, he found himself in the unfamiliar position of being the prey, with Tyson, the seasoned veteran, silently asserting his dominance without uttering a single threatening word. That Jake's critical error lay in underestimating Tyson's strategy. He had mistaken Tyson's calm demeanor and apparent indifference for weakness, not realizing that the former heavyweight champion had been playing a much longer game from the very beginning. The press conference, which Jake had likely viewed as just another opportunity to intimidate and belittle his opponent, was actually the first round of their battle, a round in which Tyson emerged as the clear victor, without even throwing a punch. That Tyson's understated yet powerful approach underscored the vast experience and mental toughness that had made him a legend in the sport. Jake, in contrast, appeared rattled and unprepared for the psychological tactics Tyson employed, leaving him vulnerable before they even stepped into the ring.
The performance of a lifetime on November 15th, and the universe will align for all of its glory and good for God.
Be in shape, be in good shape, because your health depends on it.
Hey, you're the one that wanted 8 2-minute rounds. You want to make it 10 threes? Don't talk to me about shape. Don't talk to me about shape.
Stay in shape, all right?
You want 10 threes?
Okay.
You want 10?
Now, you're probably itching to know exactly what rules Tyson dropped that sent Jake Paul spiraling into a full-blown meltdown. Well, let's dive into the specifics. The first bombshell Tyson introduced was a knockout-only victory rule. That's right, no more sneaking by with technical knockouts, no more scraping by with decision wins where the judges play a role. The only way to claim victory in this showdown was to deliver a decisive knockout, plain and simple. This rule wasn't just a minor tweak. It was a game changer, especially when you consider Tyson's legendary career. Tyson has always been known for his ability to end a fight with a single, devastating punch that sends his opponent crashing to the canvas, seeing stars. His entire legacy is built on this fearsome knockout power, making this rule almost tailor-made for someone of his caliber. But then there's Jake. Let's just say his rise in the boxing world has been, well, controversial at best. There have always been whispers, rumors, and allegations about the legitimacy of his victories. People have questioned whether Jake's wins were truly earned or if there was some behind-the-scenes manipulation at play. And now, faced with the prospect of having to deliver a knockout against one of the most feared punchers in boxing history, Jake was suddenly staring down a terrifying reality. This wasn't just any fight. This was a fight against Mike Tyson, a man who has built his entire reputation on delivering those career-defining knockouts. However, Tyson wasn't content with just one bombshell. Oh no, he had another twist up his sleeve that would take things to an even more grueling level. Tyson announced that the fight would be extended by 2 extra rounds. That's right. The bout, which was already set to be a test of endurance and willpower, was now going to push both fighters to their absolute limits. Tyson made it crystal clear that this wasn't going to be a quick, flashy showdown that ended in a matter of minutes. No, this was going to be a brutal test of endurance. A war of attrition where only the toughest, the most resilient, and the most determined would survive.
In the ring with people with the same intention, but the actuality, no.
Tyson, who has gone toe-to-toe with some of the hardest hitters in the history of the sport, 2 more rounds were nothing more than a walk in the park. He's been through the ringer countless times and has come out on top. But for Jake, whose commitment to boxing has often been called into question, this was nothing short of a nightmare come to life. The impact of Tyson's announcements was immediate and brutal. Jake Paul, who is usually brimming with unshakable confidence, suddenly found himself on shaky ground. That cocky grin he always wears like a suit of armor, the swagger that has become his trademark, vanished in an instant. Jake, the YouTuber turned boxer, who has carefully crafted an entire persona around being fearless, suddenly looked like a deer caught in the headlights. And his reaction? Pure, unfiltered panic. Jake canceled the fight on the spot, crying foul and claiming that the new rules were illegal, hoping that this would somehow get him out of the situation. But let's be real. Everyone in the room knew that was a load of nonsense. Jake's sudden decision to cancel wasn't some calculated move designed to gain the upper hand. It was a desperate attempt to escape a fight he knew, deep down, that he couldn't win. The truth was painfully clear. Jake was scared. The thought of stepping into the ring with Tyson under these new, brutal conditions had completely shattered the tough guy facade Jake had so carefully maintained. His immediate reaction to pull the plug on the fight wasn't about legality or fairness. It was about survival, plain and simple. He was terrified of what would happen if he actually had to face Tyson under these rules. The backlash was swift, and it was brutal. Jake's already shaky credibility took another nosedive as the story that had been built around him began to unravel. Jake was no longer seen as the fearless fighter he pretended to be. Instead, he was exposed as someone who had bitten off way more than he could chew and was now desperately trying to dodge the consequences of his actions. Tyson's rule changes didn't just alter the fight. They completely blew Jake's cover, revealing him as a man who was completely out of his depth, unprepared for the reality of facing a legend like Mike Tyson. The consequences for Jake were immediate and severe. The narrative around him shifted almost overnight. No longer was he seen as a rising star in the boxing world, but rather as someone who had been playing a dangerous game and had finally been called out on it. Tyson's strategic rule changes didn't just challenge Jake. They exposed the truth behind his bravado, leaving his reputation in tatters and his future in the sport uncertain.
Fight playing out.
Very painfully.
And let's be real, Tyson did exactly what needed to be done. I mean, if he's putting in all this effort, why should he waste his time on someone like Jake Paul? Especially when you consider the increasingly loud whispers about Jake's victories, which might not be as legitimate as he would like us to believe. The rumors that have been swirling are more than just idle chatter. They suggest that Jake, our YouTube sensation turned so-called boxer, has been greasing palms, slipping money to referees to ensure those TKO victories that have suspiciously padded his record. It's a serious allegation, one that casts a long, ominous shadow over Jake's entire boxing career, raising the question, is his rise in the sport built on real talent and hard work, or has it been carefully orchestrated through underhanded tactics? These allegations aren't just a passing storm. They've been simmering beneath the surface for a while. But man, the timing couldn't be worse for Jake. The press conference leading up to the fight had already left him visibly shaken. And just when he needed to project strength and confidence, these rumors started to catch fire. Suddenly, everyone was revisiting his past fights with a critical eye, scrutinizing every decision, every TKO, every split-second call with the intensity of a forensic investigation. It was no longer just a question of whether Jake could hold his own against a legend like Tyson. People were beginning to question whether Jake's entire career was built on a house of cards, a fragile structure that could collapse with the slightest provocation. The idea that Jake might have been buying his way to victory hit the boxing community where it hurts the most. Boxing isn't just a sport. It's a test of raw talent, grit, and the ability to stand up and keep going after getting knocked down. These are the qualities that Tyson embodies. Even now, despite the years, the wear and tear, and the battles he's endured in the ring. So the mere suggestion that Jake, with his flashy lifestyle, his Instagram fame, and his seemingly bottomless pockets, could bypass all that by bribing referees, that was nothing short of scandalous. As these rumors spread like wildfire, the very foundation of Jake's career started to crack in the public eye, eroding the meticulously crafted image he had built over the years. The public started to see through the veneer, and what they saw was not a fighter, but a pretender that, let's be clear, these weren't just idle gossip from jealous rivals. The whispers had been there all along, especially every time Jake won by TKO. There was always that uneasy feeling in the pit of the stomach, like something didn't quite add up. Jake's recent victory against Mike Perry felt the same way. There was an oddness, a suspicion about the way some of those fights were stopped, the decisions that seemed just a little too convenient, too perfectly timed. And when Tyson, in his wisdom, decided to drop the KO-only rule, it was like a spark that ignited a long, smoldering fire. The impact on Jake's reputation was swift, brutal, and unforgiving. Almost overnight, the hashtag fake fighter started trending across social media platforms, and suddenly Jake wasn't just fighting Tyson. He was fighting for his entire career, which now seemed to be teetering on the brink of collapse. Even within the tight-knit boxing community, the backlash was fierce and unrelenting. Fighters who had clawed their way up through the ranks, who had taken their losses on the chin and come back stronger, who had earned their scars in blood and sweat, began to see Jake as someone who was trying to cheat his way to the top, to cut in line in a sport that demands respect. The respect Jake had been craving from the boxing world was slipping further and further out of reach with each passing day. The mere idea that he might have bribed his way to victory felt like a betrayal, like a slap in the face to every fighter who had earned their place in the ring through sheer determination, grit, and sacrifice. And then came the moment that sent everything crashing down. Jake canceled the fight. It was the kind of move that practically invited the public's hatred upon him. Think about it. He's always been the one talking big, hyping up fights. Yet when it comes down to it, he's also the one who always seems to find a way to duck out, to retreat rather than stand his ground. And let's be real, these highly anticipated fights don't come cheap. We're talking about a fortune spent on promotions, marketing, training camps, all for the spectacle that fans are dying to see. You can't just back out of a fight without a damn good reason. I mean, Tyson, despite battling severe health issues, didn't cancel. He showed up, ready to fight, ready to honor the commitment he made. So, who does Jake think he is to pull the plug like that? It was a move that reeked of desperation, of a man trying to save face. But in the end, it only fueled the narrative that Jake was in over his head, that he was never really ready to step into the ring with a true champion. As the dust settled, the implications of Jake's actions reverberated through the boxing world. Fans felt cheated, betrayed by a fighter who seemed to care more about his image than the sport. Promoters and sponsors began to distance themselves, wary of the growing controversy. And in the hearts and minds of many, Jake Paul was no longer the rising star of boxing. He was the man who could have been, but never truly was. But honestly, do you really think Tyson's just going to let him walk away after all this? No way. It's far from over. Tyson isn't just going to let Jake escape the consequences of his actions. The drama, the tension, it's all building up to something bigger, something that will either make or break Jake Paul. Tyson's not done, and Jake's not out of the woods yet. The real battle, it seems, is just beginning.